Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. I am so excited to announce that we are officially back with the relaunch of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and after a brief hiatus working on various projects, it is great to be back with episode number 347. Today's theme of the day is the importance to continually learn. Our quote of the day comes to us from Steve Jobs. Learn continually. There's always one more thing to learn. I wanted to personally invite everybody to a live event that we are hosting on Saturday, May 14th in Eastchester, New York. The event is sponsored by the Accountability Forum, and the theme is taking both your personal and professional life to the next level. Shoot me an email at chris@noquitliving.com if you are interested in finding out more about this incredible live event. For today's episode, we are doing something that is a first. I interviewed the brother of today's guest a couple of years ago, which makes this the first brother-brother combination that we have had on our podcast. I know you are really going to enjoy hearing from Ryan Hawk, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Ryan, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be with you.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
I hope so. Hope I do that every day. So hopefully we make that happen today.
No pressure. We will definitely get it done. As we were talking off air, the number one objective of our podcast is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have either a no-quit story or perhaps a challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
There's probably a lot. I mean, I guess I think back to my athletic career. I was committed to Miami University out of high school here in Centerville, Ohio, and happened to play the same position and be the exact same age as another really good player named Ben Roethlisberger. And I think initially, and a lot of people had mentioned that there was no chance that I would have the opportunity to play. I was able to play as a true freshman. Ben redshirted. I played a little bit, and then going into the second year, he eventually beat me out for that job. But I think I learned a lot through that process of not being afraid to compete for 2 solid years, for understanding that sometimes you can put everything you've got into something and it still won't be enough. And it's really about how you choose to respond from those moments. And so I eventually was able to transfer to Ohio University, where I finished my collegiate playing career. I was elected captain by my teammates my senior year, and that afforded me the opportunity to play after college in the Arena Football League. So I'm grateful for having gone through a college experience that I never would have envisioned, but it was certainly useful for me, probably a younger kid who was a little bit too full of himself, who thought very highly of himself, who then got beat down a few notches and lost the job, and had to look elsewhere in order to achieve that goal and that dream of being a Division I starting quarterback. So I think that's things that'd be useful for any young kid to go through, or any person really to go through, is to realize that sometimes everything you give is not enough, and you gotta find a way to bounce back from that. And I certainly did in that moment.
I love how you frame that, and I think within that story, I think we could probably dissect it for a couple hours. But for our listeners out there, I think for me, it's not just about the highlight reel, and I think you would agree with this. Social media allows anybody and everybody to have an audience, but not only the audience, but to put out there whatever they want to. And I think the reality is everybody tries to put out their highlights. No one, or most people, don't really show the tough times. But I think within your story, it's what happens after you get knocked down. But you said something that really hit me, is sometimes when you give your all, it's not enough. And I think that's the whole premise behind this, anti-positivity, where it's just like, all right, just think it and everything's going to be great. But the reality in life is things don't always go your way. but what happens when you get knocked down? And as you said, you had a choice. You could have just stood there and been a backup, but you had a goal, a dream, and a desire, and ultimately you made that decision to transfer somewhere else, and obviously you were able to be a Division I starter and play after that. So I think that's really powerful how you share that. For those listeners who maybe don't know you or not familiar with you, if you could just give us a little quick backstory of who you are and what you do today.
After those years playing, and when I finished after my arena career and very briefly in the Canadian Football League, I got a job working in sales for a company called LexisNexis. I was a new business telephonic sales rep, cold calling, smile and dial 60, 70, 80 calls a day. Really tough job. Very low base salary, but uncapped, unlimited commissions, which was amazing. It afforded me the opportunity to use some of the work ethic that I learned from my amazing coaches at Centerville High School and at Miami and at Ohio University, and really take all of that energy and put it into another place. And I never had a real job in my life. I'd done odds and ends type things in the summer, but I never really had a real job. My job was playing football, baseball, and basketball. And my parents supported us if we were willing to really give everything to those sports. And that afforded both me and my younger brother to get college scholarships. So I think that worked, but I never had a job. So anyway, I got a job, and initially it was weird. I had to kind of get the hang of the professional life of what it's like to work in a cubicle and kind of humble myself a bit. But I grew to really love how hard it was, and how hard it was to get to the top of the stack rankings, which they posted every single day at our company. And I remember I went to my very first national sales meeting. I'd only been there 6 months, so I wasn't there long enough to qualify, but I saw these people their names were announced, and they were listed as the Circle of Excellence winners, like the top 7% of the company. And all I said was, I cannot wait until I get on that stage someday. And so that became like my motivation, was to work like crazy, to find mentors, to interview the best of the best, to learn from them, to then take bits and pieces from everybody and implement that into my game, into my first ever real job. And I took something that was initially very foreign to me and was able to do well enough to where I did win Circle of Excellence awards, did get promoted to then manager, to then director, and then eventually to VP of North American sales of a sister company of LexisNexis, where we were in charge of about $500 million of revenue. So I would say I learned a lot from the sports field into the professional world. Along the way, about 7.5 years ago, is really where the story took a turn that changed my life, is when I launched my podcast, The Learning Leader Show, really out of my own curiosity to learn from those who were more experienced and more accomplished, wiser than me. I really wanted to create my own form of a leadership PhD program. I had gone back to school to get my MBA. It took me 6 years. And when I finished getting my MBA, I thought I should still go back to school. The difference about the schooling was that I wanted it to be more personal. I wanted to make more choices. I wanted to choose my professors. So instead of going back to school, even though I had started the application process to get my PhD, I decided to create my own, where then I would reach out and I would speak with some of the most thoughtful and accomplished and impactful leaders in the world, the ones who were learning leaders, ones who never thought they had it all figured out, and do my best to be curious and to ask them questions. And who knows, maybe other people would enjoy it along the way. If I publish those, if I learn in public, maybe other people would want to learn along with me. No idea and no intention of it ever becoming a full-blown business. But as of 2017, I was able to leave corporate America, and this is what I do full-time now, is the podcast and everything that comes from it.
I love that. And as somebody who is, I think, learning on my own terms, and I think that's what technology does today. It allows us to almost pick and choose mentors, pick and choose books, podcasts, courses, and things like that. And I love how, we'll touch on your new book in a second, but I think the perspective that you have is wanting to learn from others. And I love the quote, success leaves clues. And I don't think it's thought about enough in all areas of life, where if there's somebody or something, going back to your story, when you're new to your sales career, you had those top 7% that you wanted to aspire to. And we all should have those people or things, but then it's how do we get there? And it's not just 1+1 is 2. Sometimes it's, all the things that happen between that. And I think it's really impactful that you share that. So I'm going to dive into your new book, The Pursuit of Excellence: The Uncommon Behaviors of the World's Most Productive Achievers. I think that basically sums up what you said about your turn from 2017 to now. And having read this book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, which is why you and I are speaking today. But it's some of the most successful people that I look up to, some of the most interesting books that I've read or podcasts, are the people that have learned from so many other people. So maybe a difficult question for you, but was there something or someone in your past, maybe it was your sports career, that kind of led you down this path of learning from others and mentorship and ongoing education?
When I got that first job, there was the VP of sales who was a family friend of mine. I only got hired because he was a family friend. In fact, he took a shot on me. So I'm very grateful for that, because he didn't have to now. But he believed in me, poured into me. And one of the things, the pieces of advice, because I was telling him, like, I'm noticing these people when I see their names consistently at the top of the stack rankings. I'm like, what do they do? He goes, well, you should ask them. And I go, I don't even know what I would ask them, other than kind of like, how do you do this? So we actually formulated a list of questions, and I went and interviewed all of the top performers who consistently did it over years, where I would sit in their cubicle with them and I would handwrite out their answers. And that was a big moment for me, because one, it was a great way to meet people and meet the top performers and kind of develop deeper relationships, which is very important, and especially in the corporate world, is to start developing those relationships. You want to find people who want to help you, who want to root for you. And so that started there. But then I realized the power of learning certain daily actions and behaviors and virtues of these people who were making it happen, especially in a world of something that I had no idea what was going on. I didn't understand how to even use like Outlook or my calendar or a CRM, like a customer relationship management tool. Like, I had no clue about anything. I obviously didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to script an email. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so I learned all of that from other people. And I was taking just little chunks of all these different people and then kind of mashing that together with my own personality. And, you get enough repetitions, you make enough calls, you sound like an idiot enough. You have to be willing to be embarrassed in front of everybody. You do that enough, and eventually, if you keep at it, there's a chance that you're gonna get pretty good at it. And to me, that's what happened. And fortunately, it didn't happen overnight. I remember one of my first mentors who I met during that interview process. He agreed to come in with me on every Saturday, because I was a little embarrassed initially. And so we'd go in on Saturdays and we'd write scripts and we build emails lists, and we do all these things that most people weren't doing. I would practice with him. I would say it out loud. I'd do these types of things. And we did that for about a year, where he was willing to pour into me a little extra, because I think he wanted to kind of work on becoming a better leader and a better mentor. And he wanted to show that he was doing that. And I, was more than willing to try to learn. I didn't have a lot of other things going on in my life at the time. So at that point, I would say those critical moments, interviewing all of the top performers and understanding what it was that they actually did, the way they thought about work, and then coming in extra, doing extra work with somebody who was one of the best and had been for many years, that was a big help for me. So it's all of that stems, though, around others. All of that stems around being willing to ask for help, and then taking what you're learning from others and implementing it into your game. And I think that's what my podcast is all about, is doing my best to take what I'm learning from others and implement it into my life. And hopefully other people can take from that as well. And that makes them better too.
There's so much within that answer to unpack. And I appreciate your candor and transparency. One of the things that's in your book is the concept of asking, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I believe you would agree with me. Some of the most successful people in all different walks of life have more often than not had at least one or two or three people that have mentored them, like, to use the words you said, poured into them. You gave a fantastic example of somebody committing to you for a year on Saturday, really helping you build scripts and perfecting it. But there's also the perspective of that person was able to improve his or her leadership. And I think the power within mentorship and the power within the ability to help people But to touch on the importance of just asking, which is a piece of your book, I think so many people are afraid to ask for help, are afraid to say, hey, would you mind, give me 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So just putting you on a spot here, for any of our listeners that are maybe in that category where they're just afraid to ask, was there or is there one thing that really helped you just to get to that point, or to get past the point of being scared to ask for help?
My question would be like, what are you scared of? I mean, if you don't ask, we already know what the answer is. So this may be a thing innately in me, but I've been coached my whole life. I've been coached in multiple sports. I got coached, and I love coaching. I love feedback, and sometimes you got to ask for it. So I have never been afraid to ask why, or what is it about this concept in our offense? Why are we doing it that way? I want to learn. I want to understand it better. I don't want to just run the play and call the play. I want to understand the whole philosophy. So I'm used to asking questions. I'm used to asking for help. I think that's imperative. I mean, there's this amazing Steve Jobs video. I'm happy to send it to you to put in the show notes after, but you may have already seen it. But he's 12 years old and he wants to build a frequency counter. And so Steve Jobs goes in the phone book and finds the phone number of Bill Hewlett. Yes, that Bill Hewlett. He actually sees it. He's in the phone book, and he called him up right at home. Hey, Bill, this is Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old and I want to build a frequency counter. Would you mind giving me some spare parts? This is Bill Hewlett. And he said, sure. And he goes, in fact, come on in. And Steve goes in, gets the spare parts so he could build his frequency counter. And Bill actually gives him a job, right, when he's 12 years old. And Steve tells a story to say, there's a difference between people who dream about things and people who actually do things. The people who do things are not afraid to fail. They're not afraid to ask for help. They're not afraid to ask questions. And so I see those types of things, and it helps me for those who may be scared. But the question, if anybody said that to me, is, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Why not just ask? I think there's an art to how you ask. Notice in that Steve Jobs ask, or in my ask to people, it's very specific. There's a purpose. The one question that I would never ask, ever, 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 is, can I pick your brain? That question is stupid. It doesn't say anything to anybody. It doesn't give anything specific. It doesn't say what you want to talk about. Instead of saying that, say, hey, I'd like to launch a podcast. I noticed you do great prep for your interviews. Can you walk me through how you prepare for an interview? You're like, yeah, I can do that. That's fun. I enjoy that. I'm flattered by that question versus this very broad, gross sounding question. So that's to say, the one piece of art when it is, if you're going to ask, be specific. I'd like to have some spare parts to build a frequency counter, or whatever it may be. Be specific, do your homework, make sure you're prepared, make a specific ask, and then move on. I think, yes, if they ignore you or they reject you or they act like, whatever, that's fine. You're in the same spot you were when you started. Just move on to the next one, or put on your calendar and ask 3 months from now. I think those things, being scared to ask is going to put you in the position of being the dreamer versus the doer. And I'd rather hang out with the doers.
So if it's okay with you, I'd like to pick your brain, Ryan, if that's okay with you. I have to, full and fair disclosure, I have used that let me pick your brain. And I think for the rest of my life, not only having read your book, but having listened to you share it, I'm going to say this on my own podcast, that I hope that I will never say that again. And if I do,
you don't have to hope. It's pretty easy. Just don't do it.
But if I do, I'm going to say in front of all our listeners that I'm going to do my absolute best to immediately recorrect what it is, because I think one of the things I found about sayings too, and you do fantastic preparation, and I think it's evident in the work you do, but I think we often have things that we go to as far as our sayings, and I think that's one of those things that in the past, no longer moving forward, but we've said, hey, let me pick your brain, or hey, I'd love to. And I think to your point, just the way you described it, is asking a specific question about a podcast is a flattering comment, and it's a flattering question, and it makes that person, I don't want to say take their wall down per se, but I think they're more receptive to having a conversation as opposed to feeling like they're getting interrogated, versus really having a conversation with somebody that is looking for some guidance or help.
Well, I think most people are willing to help. They want to help. I do. I mean, people still email and ask that question, and I don't deny them. I'll do it. But I think part of it though is I want to see that you've done some work. And if you haven't prepared or thought about it, or you don't have a specific purpose behind it, I'm not as excited, but I'm much more excited. It doesn't have to be about it can be about anything, but whatever it may be, if there is a specific purpose behind the ask, you're more excited, you're more ready to go. You also can be better prepared as the helper. Like, set me up, help me be a better helper. So I think with whatever it may be, just being more specific, whether you're praising somebody or whether you're asking for something, that has now over the last few years has as you could imagine has been a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, because to me it's just a little bit lazy. It's a lazy ask, as opposed to doing a little bit more work and being a little bit more specific and being more intentional with the purpose behind it. And if more people asked that way, the response rate, the positivity of the response rate, guaranteed would go up.
I could not agree more. And with that in mind, in your introduction, you talk about something that I think is so powerful, but the idea of, will I be better tomorrow than I am today? And I think going back to my comment a few minutes ago about social media is people put across their absolute best, their highlight reel. And I think what I personally like, and I think you do as well, just from your podcast and what you do, is peeling back the layers and saying, okay, yes, this person has achieved this level of excellence or this level of success, but what are those 1% steps along the way? So just wanted to ask you if you couldn't just touch on that. Will I be better tomorrow than I am today?
I mean, I love prompts. So I love being able to sit down at the end of the night and say, what did I do today that made me a little bit wiser when I lay down to bed than when I woke up? What was it? I need to be able to answer that question. That's a self audit I should be doing every single night. I do. What did I do today? Right. Already today, it's whatever, 1:53 Eastern. And I had a meeting with a mentor of mine named Brooke Cups. We actually taught a class together today. And I learned so much about culture. He's the Ohio High School Division I Coach of the Year this year in high school basketball. So Brooke is one of my most treasured friends. And I wrote about him in the book. And the things I learned about culture, I went home for lunch today and talked to my wife and just said, oh God, like this was what an amazing hour. Like Brooke and I were teaching it together, and I learned probably just as much or more than all the students in this class. And so that's for me a prompt that I intentionally put that on my calendar. Brooke and I intentionally have these meetings to make sure that I'm going to bed wiser tonight. And I have these notes on culture. I've already since sent a note to Dan Coyle, who wrote the Culture Code, to talk a little bit more about this, because it's one of the best books on culture there is. He's got another one coming out where I want to ask him some deeper questions based on what I learned today. These are actions to take to ensure that I go to bed a little bit wiser, not a lot, a little bit wiser than when I woke up. And to me, that's the mark of a good day. So there are other things, family related and all that stuff. But one of the prompts that I think we all should ask is, what did I intentionally do today to be a little bit wiser when I went to bed than when I woke up? And I'm not saying every day is going to be perfect. And some days, yes, they're tough or whatever, life happens. I get it. But I would hope the majority of those days you can say, I did this, and you have a specific story you journal about, you take notes, whatever you want to do. That to me is one of those ways to get incrementally better every single day. And that stuff adds up, right? You've read Atomic Habits by James Clear, right? We know the what happens when it compounds over time. It dramatically can go up if you're intentional about doing that every day.
I love that. And I love that whole concept you just shared about that self-audit at night. And I'll just share with you and our listeners too. I ask myself 3 questions every single night. I have my own planner and I have a journal that I use. And the 3 questions are very simple. Is 1, did I learn today? Number 2, did I fail today? And number 3, did I get out of my comfort zone today? And I have to be clear with this. Didn't just happen one time when I just said I'm going to do all this. These are things that I've tweaked and changed and learned. The question, did I fail today? I got that from Sarah Blankley, who created Spanx. She spoke about what her father used to ask her every night at the dinner table. And I think to your comment before about that self-audit, it's so important to have those incremental increases. And I know that you know the concept, and everybody talks about 1% better every day, and that one day or that 2 days, it doesn't look like anything. But if you compound that over a good week or a good 2 weeks, and I think the word that I want to repeat that you said, it's not about being perfect, and no day or night always is going to be perfect. But I guarantee every single one of us, especially the listeners, we all have those things in our life that we can self-audit and say, okay, even though I maybe didn't get this, I made incremental improvements, or I got a little bit better here, or I had 4 things on my to-do list and I got the 3 biggest ones done, and I'll put that 4th one on the list tomorrow. So I really love you touching on that. Is the self-audit something that you've always done, or is that something that you've kind of picked up along the way?
There's very few things I've always done. I would say the bulk of my learning has really increased over the past decade. I needed to mature a little bit. Like I spoke to a high school class yesterday, and I was just amazed at the caliber of their questions and how intentional they are and how thoughtful they are. I was not like that. I was not well read. Now, but the next best time to work on that is obviously right now. So I would say, to me, I just needed to mature a little bit. So no, I haven't always been like that. The one thing I would tweak on your questions instead of did I fail is how did I fail today? If assuming the answer is yes, or how did I succeed, or whatever you want to do, instead of them being yes, no questions, I would make them more open-ended questions with your prompts, because then the answer is actually something more than just the yes or the no. And you may already do that anyway, but I think anytime a question can shift from a yes or a no to more open-ended, usually it can be more useful, or the response can create can be a little bit more useful.
Yeah, no, that's a great point you made, and mine are I always answer them in my journal. So those questions are written down, and it's more along the lines to your point before about that self-audit, where it's like, okay, I'm getting ready for bed. I got to go through it. And there are some days, to, full transparency, where the answer is no. And at first it would mess with my mind, just because that's the way I am, where I'd have to take a step back and be like, okay, it's not about being perfect where you have that check mark for everything. But I appreciate you expanding on that. And I have to say that you and I are very similar, where the last decade's really been for me that, and to your point, I think it is a maturity point. It's also when you're ready for it, because you being a former athlete, you could have the best coach in whatever sport you were playing, but if you're not ready and open, it's the same thing as having no coach whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think about that a lot as a dad, because I so badly feel the benefit of being a reader, but I also know what I was like when I was their age, even many years older than they are, and there's no way I was reading a book. So now I can't stop, but at their age, I'm just trying to introduce it and make it in a fun way and find anything that they're curious about, because I know the value of that, but I did not really see the value of that until I got into the professional working world, and a mentor was like, you should check this out. And eventually I stumbled onto a book that I liked, and that then opened this door of like, oh my God, books can change your life. I need to start doing this more. And so but you're right though, like I wasn't ready, or I didn't want to, and I had no curiosity or desire to do that when I was younger. As I got a little bit older, I did, and now I kind of see that. So I think, just like anything else, learning can compound. Learning can really happen if you're willing to kind of dedicate yourself to it.
No, and I could not agree more. I'll share a very quick funny story. Many years ago, I was part of the first ever John C. Maxwell speaking, training, and coaching certification program. And we actually had a lot of time with John, and I'm a avid reader now. Growing up, my dad always challenged me positively, hey, read. And I was always, because it was coming from him, no. But John shared something that I've stolen, tweaked, and I use with my 3 kids now, is he paid his kids when they were younger to read books. I don't remember if he had them write anything out, but what I do with my three kids, and they're 13, just turned 10, and just turned 9, 13, 11, and just turned 9, I pay them for the books that they read, and they have to write a very short little synopsis. And obviously my younger guy, his are the shortest, and my older guy, his are the longest, but it's trying to tweak them, trying to, tweak their interest, but having that monetary piece. And somebody in the crowd asked John at the one of the events, and he said, don't you feel that it's kind of misleading in some ways? He said, no. He said, it's the same thing. Like if you eat your vegetables, you can have dessert, or if put your clothes away, we can watch TV. He said it's the same thing. He said, I have to say that both of my kids and both as a kids are avid readers. So I've done that myself. And how old are your kids?
15, 14, 13, 13, 7.
15. That was not a repeat, everybody. No, so yeah, so maybe I don't want to cost you any money, but maybe that's the one of the ways to get them
No,
to do a
I
little
would
more.
pay. I know a lot of parents have had the rule like there is no limit to the money I'll spend on books. I have that rule. Like there is no limit. If you want a book, we go to the library, and try to sit and read and write. But it's like most things as parents, it's a work in progress. We're working at it.
I love it. So we're going to change the lanes here for a question, for a question that I'm very curious to get your answer. I know you know the famous quote by Jim Rohn: "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." If I could grant you dinner with any 5 people that you could level up with, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Probably George Washington, Dave Matthews, Steve Carell, Kobe Bryant, maybe Abigail Adams. I don't know. A mixture between leaders and sports and a little music.
So obviously a big fan of The Office.
Yeah, yeah. I love. I've seen every episode, most of them multiple times. I've also heard. I'm lucky to get to go to Lake Tahoe every year with my younger brother, and we've played with some people who were in that show, and I've heard stories about what Steve Carell is like outside of it, and it sounds like he's one of the kindest human beings on the planet, on top of being one of the funniest. So I think when you're sitting at dinner, it's nice to be with kind and funny people who probably have amazing stories because he's lived a few years. So to me, I think I want to learn and I want to laugh. I think that makes a great dinner. I want to learn and I want to laugh, and so I think if you mix it with a combination of people who will certainly teach you some things. I mean, I'm reading Ron Chernow book on Washington, so he's top of mind. But I think there's obviously some learning to there, and you want to add some levity to that conversation with kind people. That's what a Carell could bring. So, yeah, it's a tough question, but it is an interesting one. That list probably changes like every day, but as of right now, that's what I would put. That's who I'd put on it.
No, and that's why I've asked that question, because it is a fun question. And just like
Yeah.
your list, to be totally honest with you, I have a list because I've asked it of like 22 people, and it initially started where I was like, all right, I got to get my 5. I just literally sent that list earlier today to a friend of mine, and he was like,
Who's on it?
oh, geez. Michael Jordan is a huge one. Elon Musk is on it. George Washington is on mine as well.
Oh,
Jim
cool.
Rohn, Napoleon Hill. Oprah is on my list. Did I mention Rafael Nadal? I'm a huge tennis
Oh,
fan.
he'd be cool. Yeah, that'd be cool.
And I need I think a Spanish translator. But then there's little things that go on, and I think to your point about the timing, I went down a pretty deep dive about 6 months ago with some of Bruce Lee's things that he's written and what he said, and he's now on my list. But 7 months ago, he was nowhere near. So if you ask me this question a year from now, I'm sure it'll change. So I have to steal a question from you in your book that you stole from Jason Gagnon, I believe is how you say it.
Gaynard?
Oh, excuse me, Gaynard. If you and I are talking a year from now, what would you be celebrating?
I think I even hesitate to say it, but that's sometimes a better reason to do it than not. Um, I would probably have either sold the rights to my 3rd book, or I will have decided to self-publish it, depending on how we're going. So that would probably be something we'd celebrate. I think writing, as you know, is very hard to do it well. It's very hard to get it from your head to the page in a entertaining and useful way for the reader. And I think I am a big believer in quitting books. I think if the author has not earned every single turn of the page, you should go to another book. And so I don't think you should quit a lot of things, but I do think that is one thing you should, if that author has not earned every single turn of the page. And so that's how I view writing books, is that every single page I have to earn it. And to me, that is a much harder challenge than recording a podcast or giving a keynote speech in front of thousands of people, is earning the page turn. So that's probably what we would be celebrating, because I think it's the hardest thing for me, not for everybody, but I think for me is to earn each one of those page turns.
I love that. And I've never heard that before. I'm going to steal that and use that. So for our listeners who want to connect with you, follow you, and also want to find out more about your podcast, what's the best way for them to do so?
Learningleader.com is where everything is. So my books, every single podcast, so 460 plus podcasts from the last 7 years are housed there. Obviously, you can also find them wherever you listen to podcasts, but the Learning Leader Show is the name of it. But the website where is my home base for everything is learningleader.com. And
then last question I have for you is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
I guess there's a couple things. One, when I see some of the commonalities among people who have sustained excellence over time, they have a bias for action. In a world of talkers and doers, be a doer, right? You learn as you go. You got to get started first. And the best way to learn is to actually do something. So to get whatever that thing is, get started. And then the single greatest determining factor in your long-term success or failure, which I learned from Jim Collins, is your who. Who will be your friends? Who will be your mentor? Who will you mentor? Who will you marry? Who will you surround yourself? You'll become those people, as you already mentioned from the Rome quote. So your who, I firmly believe, will make or break everything. So look around, do that audit. Who am I spending my time with? How am I being intentional about that? That's what I'm going to become. And so how am I consistently trying to put myself in rooms with people who are far wiser than me, far kinder than me, people who are regularly making it happen? How can I put myself in those rooms? How can I get myself in those rooms? How can I add value to those people's lives? Like, what can I do? And I think if you have that mindset, the chance of things going well dramatically increases. And that's certainly what I try to do. And I think it's when I've noticed that I've done that well, things have gone better than if I don't.
I think that is a fantastic way to end today's show. And I can't thank you enough for your time. And I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
Sure. Thanks, man. Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to episode number 347. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. To quote Ryan, in a world full of talkers and doers, be a doer. With that in mind, I would like to personally challenge each and every one of our listeners to focus today on doing and not talking by taking action. Don't forget to crush your day, and remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.